Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal EMac coming to you on a Saturday morning. We have a multi-sport day ahead of us here, but we're going to talk a little basketball because the association is officially starting. It is the playoffs here, and they were quick to point out that the play-in games are not actually the playoffs. So I found that interesting because DraftKings said that I won a bonus ticket. They said it would be in the first round of the playoffs. They assumed the playoffs were the play-in games, so I didn't get to use my ticket. But technicalities, whatevs. We have basketball. We have meaningful basketball, which is a lot of fun. Most everybody is healthy, and we've got a lot to talk about and break down here. We are today brought to you by Better. If you sign up in the link below us here in the YouTube description, you can get your first card that you make out there risk-free, up to 250. So that is definitely something you want to consider. And remember, don't dock off that first card with a $5 card. Make sure it is at least 20 or 50 bucks. It's well worth it to take your shot here and there. All right. Let's see. I'll sit closer to the mic here. Let's see what happens. Greg, what's going on? Any overarching thoughts? We have most everybody healthy for this slate. Couple ancillary pieces are not going to be active, and then a few people that were still hurt at the end of the regular season, but we should have everybody else good to go today.
Yeah. So just as, because you asked about big picture things, here's what's going to be most important is with this being the start of the playoffs, and we saw a little bit of this in the play-in game as well, minutes are different for players. Rotations are different. You don't have teams playing like 10-man rotations. Actually, the Magic might, but all the other teams are going to play pretty tight rotations. We're going to see star players play really, really big minutes. So, for instance, I was creating spreads for games yesterday, and I was looking back at the Suns playoff rotations when I was putting together spreads for the Timberwolves Suns game. And the first thing that stood out to me was last year, the first round of the playoffs that the Suns played in, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker each played over 40 minutes in every single game of the first round. And that's what we should expect from star players to open up the playoffs. They are going to be playing 40 plus minutes, which creates kind of interesting scenarios for DFS because it does two things. It makes the stars a lot better while also making it so that the guys at the end of the bench that you typically need to pay up for the stars are not viable because they're just not going to be in the rotation. So it creates a lot of interesting decision points.
Yeah, and we from time to time even see players that we're pretty sure are going to play end up not playing. And even though we're projecting them for 8 to 10 minutes whatsoever, it's not a complete shock for people to not get in there because they could have their first rotation skipped, and anything after that is going to be tenuous and essentially game flow dependent. So it is kind of interesting to keep that in mind. Up at the top, we have ample centers today. So that should make things rather interesting. Up at the top, we have Nikola Jokic. He is about 10 median fantasy points, 12 median fantasy points ahead of everybody else on DraftKings. The gap is closed on the FanDuel and Yahoo scoring system because they don't have the double-double and triple-double bonuses. So Joel Embiid kind of gets closer within half a dozen points of Jokic on that one. Do you have a lean at the person you want to pay up for at the top? I mean, it's easy to say Jokic, but there is no discount, nor should there be, on his salary today.
Yeah, so it's going to be different on the different sides. Also, if you guys have any questions for us, if you're in Discord, you could at me at any time over the course of the show, and I'll be checking to see what kinds of questions we get from customers in Discord. But I do think DraftKings and FanDuel are quite a bit different today. And if you're asking me who's my favorite spend-up option, and we don't have to worry about ownership or price or anything like that, to what you had said before, yeah, the answer is going to be Nikola Jokic. However, when we're taking ownership into account, we have fairly low ownership projected to go to Joel Embiid, which I just don't think the field has that correct. When you consider that Joel Embiid should be playing pretty healthy minutes here to open up the playoffs, you are getting $1,000 price discount, him versus Nikola Jokic. Who scores more fantasy points more often than not? Yeah, I'm going to say Nikola Jokic. But for the ownership discount we have on Embiid right now, I'll pull up our most recent ownership here. But when I was building my lineups before lock, Embiid was only projected for 8% ownership. That is a very, very low mark considering the ceiling that we have in Joel Embiid.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go up and down some of the teams really only have four players that are even going to be more than 5%
Mm-hmm.
owned on the 4 game slate. You can say that about the Lakers. You can say that about a lot of Philadelphia. And those are two teams that, we were looking throughout most of the regular season at their 7, 8, 9 guys when we didn't have that injury value or somebody was out with an illness or etc. That's really off the table today, which makes this a fun puzzle. Now things of course are going to get even more consolidated than ever once we get into the single game and the 2 game slates and all of that, and the finals and the conference finals. However, for now we want to remember, as where Greg is going with this, you want to think about leverage. You want to take some of those chances. That road not taken, would it be a complete shock if Embiid has 60 fantasy points and Jokic has just 55, but that little bit of savings gets you to a different player, and all of a sudden you've got like a 4v4 versus the rest of the field, and you're rocketing up the leaderboard, right? That's an intriguing situation to have under consideration. How do you feel about Anthony Davis, kind of another apex player in that top 5 projected fantasy points, and yet another center only option?
Yeah. So for what it's worth, also just going over. So I'm playing a little bit heavier on FanDuel today than DraftKings. I just like the contest better on FanDuel. But in terms of the big men that we're talking about right now, I have 45% Joel Embiid, 25% Anthony Davis, 20% Nikola Jokic. So the benefit that Anthony Davis has over these guys, because he doesn't project as many fantasy points or even close to it, that guys like Embiid or Jokic do. But the difference is that Anthony Davis gets power forward eligibility. So being able to roster him a power forward on DraftKings, in addition to center, that does make a pretty big difference. And then I also wanted to talk about pay up options on FanDuel, because I do have it different on FanDuel. The pay up option I get to the most on FanDuel actually is Nikola Jokic. And that's because over on FanDuel, Jokic is projected for 6% ownership right now. So you just get crazy, crazy low ownership on Nikola Jokic. And also just with the way the salaries are in general on FanDuel, it's easier to pay up for some studs. So for FanDuel purposes, Jokic is the stud I have the most of.
All right. What other players at the other positions near the top do you think could unseat one of those centers here as a priority play?
Yeah. So at other positions, I mean, the guys that I'm spending up the most for are the big men. If I had to pick one guy at each other position that I'd want to get to as a spend up option, if I had to, this isn't even necessarily what I'm doing, but at point guard, it would be Jalen Brunson. We saw last year in the playoffs, and once again, I have more exposure to the big men than I have to Brunson, but just based on what your question is going to make a case for him here. We saw Brunson play 48 minutes at times last year in the playoffs. I don't think that's going to be the case right off the bat from game one, but I think like 44 minutes is a reasonable projection on Jalen Brunson, but he does have the potential to play 48 minutes. Whereas I don't really think any of the other stars on the slate are live to play 48 minutes, but Tibbs just doesn't give a shit. He's totally good to run Brunson into the ground. So the playing time upside on Jalen Brunson would make him the point guard option that I think is most likely to potentially outscore like Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic. If we're going to talk about shooting guard, I would go with Devin Booker there. Same reasons I said before. Like, I'm just going to look for guys that have potential to play a massive amount of minutes, because these guys are not nearly the fantasy producers that Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic are, but they could end up playing like 6, 7 more minutes, which could make a difference. Devin Booker was playing upwards of 45 minutes in games in the first round of the playoffs last year. Same reason I would say at power forward, you could go with Kevin Durant, who's also bizarrely low priced on DraftKings at $8,600. So that's a way that I think you could go. At small forward, you got LeBron James and Anthony Edwards. I would go LeBron in that category. I mean, it's slim pickings. You only got 2 pay up options that have small forward eligibility, but I'd say LeBron is my favorite to be the highest scorer at small forward.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Kind of the I hate the overuse of the word narrative, but sort of the discussion around this is probably the last best chance that LeBron has. He's got, Davis is healthy. They have one of the don't know that deeper is the right word, but one of the better group of reserves that they've had pretty much since the pandemic season when they ended up winning that title. And while there's a dramatic drop between Davis and LeBron down to Hachimura and Reeves and Russell, and then another gigantic leap down to the rest of the guys coming off the bench, this is still a pretty good team. So I'm looking forward to this night game just to see the feeling out process, right? It's like the proverbial fighters in the ring, kind of just testing, see what's going to happen for that first round, to see where the weaknesses are of the other teams and how they're going to counter stuff. So I think that is going to be absolutely fascinating. But that's a long wait, Greg, from 1 o'clock until that final tip off here. I'm going to be staring at a lot of PMR and not very much currently winnings today. How's my psyche going to handle that?
I don't know. You're gonna have to put on your big boy pants and grow some balls, I guess. Then, EMac.
Well, but as we've discussed time and time again, you can't win a contest unless you have a player from the last game of the slate. That's just those are the rules. That was
there's a large section of people who are going to hear that and just believe it to be true. They're not going to understand the irony.
There is no irony. I'm not ironing. There are no wrinkles in this. Come on, what are we talking about ironing? Alrighty, so who are some of the cheaper guys that you would feel good about? We're going to get the cash game contest question, or the safer play question. What are you looking at kind of on the cheaper side, knowing full well we really don't want to dip beyond the 7th or 8th man in these rotations because very few teams are going to get there unless it's fourth quarter mop-up duty by someone.
Yeah, so this applies to both FanDuel and DraftKings, but Jonathan Isaac has been really, really good this year. And I think you can make a case that on a per-minute basis, he actually might be the best player on the Magic. Now, part of the reason is because he's been able to play, 18, 20 minutes per game, and he would be, less effective on a per-minute basis should he be playing, like a minutes load that Franz Wagner or Paulo Banchero are playing. But Jonathan Isaac started in the final game of the season for the Orlando Magic and played 26 minutes. And I do think there's a scenario where Isaac ends up playing more minutes in the playoffs simply because of how good he is, especially on defense. And he's also a very, very good fantasy producer overall for the season. If we look at Jonathan Isaac, and once again, keep in mind that he hasn't played the most amount of minutes over the course of the season, but still really strong points per minute fantasy producer, and also somebody who played better as the year went on, which isn't particularly surprising because if you remember, there was a point in time, I don't know how long ago now, like 4 years ago or something, where Jonathan Isaac was one of the best overall defensive players in the league. He was an all NBA defense candidate. And then he just ran into a terrible run of bad luck with injuries, knee injury, re-injures his knee, had a handful of other situations that popped up as well. And now the last couple of games of the season where he started the last game, played 26 minutes. The game before that, he also played 26 minutes. And overall for the season, he scored over a fantasy point per minute. So if we are just even conservative with the playing time of Jonathan Isaac and say 24 minutes, well, as a guy who's scoring a little bit over a fantasy point per minute, you land on right around 25 fantasy points for him. And then when you consider how cheap his price point is, how hard it is to find value, it is difficult for me to get away from Jonathan Isaac. And I do consider him the best value play on the slate.
No, and I think that is a really good call out. And he is one of the guys, because I'm looking at, I was more thinking because baseball's locking it around the same time here, basketball's locking around the same time. I was kind of thinking I'd skip this game here, but Isaac, I do think is the best median fantasy point play or point per dollar play. I mean, he just comes in with the best ratios. His upside is attached to blocks and steals. Guess what he's good at? Defensive stats. So that's nice. He can do a variety of things, as you mentioned. The only worry is, does he get up over, much over 24 minutes or so? But we could see that, right? That now most of these games are going to have a day, if not two, between them for the first round, because there are a lot of games to be played. So the TV things kind of spread things out a little bit. So that would be more rest for him. Orlando plays again on Monday, and then they don't play again until Thursday. So you can see that there's a 48-hour break, but then there's basically a 3-day break there. So that's good for the off injured players or the elder statesmen such as LeBron. Alrighty. So Jonathan Isaac is the more or less obvious player, probably industry consensus. Is there an Ehrenberg play? Is there something that you have a little bit of insight to that you would like to call out from one of the lower salaried players?
And then also for reference, Jonathan Isaac got everything refreshed here. He's projected for 42% ownership over on FanDuel, on DraftKings coming in at 47% ownership. To what you said, he's going to be quite popular, but I really do think that it is warranted when it comes to Jonathan Isaac. Is there like an ownership range that you're thinking here, EMac?
It's 20% or below, and that gives you a lot of options.
All right, 20% or below. And what price point?
DK, let's talk around the sub 5,700, FanDuel around the similar rate.
All right. So if that is going to be the case, I'll do one with DraftKings and I'll look over for FanDuel as well. But I think where it is going, I'm going to go right back to the Magic here, and it's going to be Gary Harris for DK purposes. And the reason that the answer is Gary Harris is because I don't like anybody for the price point that you had given me, and that is not picking up any kind of ownership. So Gary Harris is $3,600. He is a veteran that I think could be seeing extra playing time in the postseason. Just he's been in these situations before. These are the kind of scenarios where we'll see teams lean on these players a little bit more frequently. And whether Gary Harris starts or if Jonathan Isaac starts, either way, the one that isn't in the starting lineup is going to be the first player off the bench for the Magic, in my opinion, and are still going to play. I think Gary Harris plays somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes, and I think Jonathan Isaac plays mid to high 20s minutes. And it's really just he's very cheap, picking up no ownership. And I think that he's fairly secure to at least be in the rotation. The other options that are in this price range are really, really shitty, EMac. So you could also go Eric Gordon, who's $3,100. It's projected for 9% ownership on DraftKings, but it doesn't have the same playing time upside that I think that we have in Gary Harris, because I do think the Magic are one of the one teams on the slate today. They're probably going to play a little bit thinner of a rotation. The problem I have with giving Eric Gordon a bunch of minutes is where do they come from? Because if you're going to give Eric Gordon a bunch of minutes, it means that those playing time has to come from probably either Bradley Beal, from Kevin Durant, from Devin Booker, or maybe from Grayson Allen. And I think all of those guys have very secure roles with the Suns. So that's why I think we're probably only going to see somewhere around 20 minutes for Eric Gordon. But long story short, I'm going with Gary Harris here because the options are pretty shitty.
All right. And then we got a couple super chats here, but Safe Din is asking, what about Gabe Vincent?
Gabe Vincent, I don't think he's a lock to be in the rotation. It's hard for me to want to get there.
Okay. Let's think about what ways he could get in there potentially for some defense. There are going to still be several other players ahead of him, though.
Yeah, with Gabe Vincent, he only played 18 minutes in the Lakers play-in game, and that's like a reasonable expectation. I just don't think he's guaranteed to get any kind of minutes, though. He could, but he's not guaranteed to be playing like anything substantial.
All right. So,
and he's not a good fantasy producer either.
Okay. I dropped the link in chat there so you guys can sign up to Better. That again is your first card is risk-free, or you get a second chance up to $250 if it does not pay off. That is something that's very, very helpful. They also have a free square today for anybody signing up, and the free square that you need to select is that if Luka Doncic scores at least 1 point, you win. Now that game is tomorrow, but you want to take advantage of these free squares wherever you can find them. We've got a couple other deals here. The most important one, aside from Better, is to let you know that the Sims package is now 50% off. Now this is a special deal. You need to go in through the link in the YouTube description below us here, and you need to use the promo code PLAYOFFS. But that will get you your first weekly package on the Sims at 50% off. So we're not running that one out everywhere. This is for the show, people. This is for you guys. So come in through the link in the YouTube description below us here. And then last but not least, and we'll talk about this a little later as well, but we have Odd Shopper. That's available first week for just $1. How can you go wrong, right? Just throw $1 out there, see what happens. It covers the pick'em sites. It covers better. It covers all of the other pick'em sites, all of the main sports books, the market-based approach to sports wagering. It is definitely a lot of fun. There are parlay builders on there. It talks about how to find the actual implied value of some of the bonus wagers or promotional wagers that are out there that some of the sites put together, because sometimes they aren't very favorable to you. I'm looking right at you, Hard Rock Casino, that has a monopoly here in the state of Florida and offers pretty much nothing to the rest of us. And we like it because otherwise we wouldn't even have wagering. But anyway, that's $1 for Odd Shopper, promo code playoffs, and 50% off a 1-week package for Stochastic Sims, promo code playoffs. Let's get over here to tiers. We've got Ace of Spades. We'll run through this quickly. Let's take about 40 minutes on this because I know everybody loves when I talk about these. Tier 1, Nikola Jokic. Pretty straightforward. Agree or disagree?
Let me pull this up right here. But yes, tier 1 is going to be Nikola Jokic.
All right. Tier 2, Jalen Brunson is about 4 points higher than Anthony Edwards, but we haven't talked about Ant yet. I suspect we will shortly. Would you go away from Brunson to Ant on tier 2?
I prefer Brunson in tier 2 by a pretty wide margin.
Now, tier 3, everything gets close. You've got Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, and Paolo Banchero, all within 1.5 of each other. I'm leaning towards Durant here. I like how you called out that they're likely to play, based upon last year, likely to play very heavy minutes. So I think I would lean towards Durant.
So for me in tier 3, I'm going to go with Donovan Mitchell. You can make a strong case for Mitchell, Banchero, or Durant, though.
Yep, agreed. Tier 4, you've got minutes with Josh Hart. You've got block shots potentially with Rudy Gobert. Do you like one of those players over the other? They're well above Mobley and Garland.
Yeah, tier 4 is Gobert for me.
Right. And then 5, do we go with oft injured but actually playing today Bradley Beal or Michael Porter Jr. with a crowded Denver rotation now with everybody back?
Yeah, that is going to be Bradley Beal for me.
All right. And then tier 6, you have Aaron Gordon standing out dramatically, almost 10% more than everybody else. I'm kind of leaning towards Mike Conley myself. Which do you prefer there? They're the clear-cut 1, 2.
Aaron Gordon.
All righty. So that was the tiers for us. So let's get back to some of the analysis here. What do you think about Anthony Edwards and perhaps some of our secondary stars, the budding superstars? Jamal Murray can be put into that category. Not quite the Dante DiVincenzo group, but that tier below the stars.
Yeah, so if we're talking about all of the players that are in, like, what are you talking, like the 7K-ish type range or so?
Exactly.
Something like that. Yeah, so if we're talking about like the 7K range on DK, the guy I'm getting the most of there is Jamal Murray. And there's kind of like an ongoing joke about Jamal Murray where he's the only player in the NBA where people say they need to see it in the regular season to believe in him, where so often the narrative around players is, all right, yeah, they're great in the playoffs or they're great in the regular season, but what are they going to end up doing in the playoffs? Whereas Jamal Murray's been a player who's actually pretty consistently been a better player in the playoffs over the course of his career. And also, we've seen numerous times that the Denver Nuggets, they're very cautious with Murray's minutes in the regular season, and they allow him to really ramp up his playing time as well as his role in the postseason. So Jamal Murray, I do think we're going to start to see very much increased minutes. If you look at his playing time from the end of the regular season, he played 24, 29, 20. We have not seen actually over 30 minutes from Jamal Murray in exactly a month since he last played over 30 minutes. So I expect him to be fully rested and ready to go. Assuming the game's competitive, we're probably getting around 40 minutes out of Jamal Murray. And he is priced down because of how limited his minutes were at the tail end of the season.
So I dug into him a little bit today because he ended up being the recommended wager of the day, under 2.5 made 3-pointers for him. So it was interesting. He, 2 years ago, he ended up missing most of the season with that knee issue, which was unfortunate. He was back last year, obviously a big reason for the Nuggets winning the World Championship. Everybody's healthy right now. While he is averaging and is projected for around three made 3-pointers today, I got it at plus money, plus 135 by looking at Odd Shopper there. So that was something that I found was a pretty decent bet. Yeah, could he splash 3 in the first quarter? Of course he could. He's Jamal Murray. But with the full rotation, we're a little uncertain about the actual minutes. There's a long playoff road ahead. Last playoffs, it took him 20 games to get to the championship. That's a long second season, if you will. I'm okay taking the under at that plus money. And Odd Chopper had it as rated out as a positive bet as long as it was plus 120 or better. Just a buck, Odd Chopper, that is. Let's see. Favorite tournament plays at each position on DraftKings. That is for Tim Bourne's $5 super chat.
I think we also missed the super chat from Deuce Trey. I saw him asking about it in the YouTube chat.
Oh, we got a few, and we've got Jacob Dunn. So hit those GPPs. I'll queue up these other super chats. Go from there.
Yeah, so we had a question here from Deuce Trey. He said, what's cracking, fellas? FanDuel plays by position. Yeah, so here are the players I have the most of at each position on FanDuel. Starting at point guard, that is Mike Conley. Shooting guard, that is OG Anunoby. Small forward, that is also Anunoby. So then scrolling down, here's how I'll change it up. So point guard, that's going to stay the same. Shooting guard, I'm going to go with KCP so that I could say that I'm going to go OG Anunoby at small forward. Power forward, that is going to be Jonathan Isaac for me. And then center, Nikola Jokic.
With those kind of double as your cash core plays for those wondering.
For FanDuel cash plays, let's see. Yeah, I would still play Conley in cash at point guard. At shooting guard. Yeah, so let's just go look at all the players. So if I'm looking at everybody on the entire slate, the guys that you absolutely should be playing in cash games on FanDuel are Anunoby, Conley, Aaron Gordon, KCP, Jonathan Isaac. Those 5, I think, are the cash game players you should have for FanDuel.
Right. Sticking with FanDuel, let's hit that Jaden McDaniel question there. How much Jaden McDaniel are you getting in your portfolio here? We currently have him projected for about 30 minutes and 20 FanDuel points.
Yeah, I'm almost exactly even with the field. The field we have him projected for right around 40% ownership. That's where I'm also landing with my lineups on Jaden McDaniels. And yeah, there just aren't that many cheap guys to like. He's also more favorable fantasy score on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings because of the defensive stats that he brings to the table. So Jaden McDaniels is one of my favorite cheap options that we have on FanDuel. And also there's not only the upside of him bringing the extra fantasy points from the defensive stats on FanDuel, but also if he avoids foul trouble and maybe Karl-Anthony Towns is more limited than we expect, because don't forget, Karl-Anthony Towns has just recently come back from knee surgery. So if we see Karl-Anthony Towns limited to around 30 minutes or so, there's a chance we see like 35, 36 minutes out of Jaden McDaniels and he exceeds our minutes projection. I think he's a higher ceiling than what we're projecting him at. Not that I think our minutes projection is unreasonable. I just think there's a potential for more upside there. So Jaden McDaniels, I'm right around even with the field than I'm with McDaniels at a little bit less than half my lineups.
All right. The only other person I can kind of see in that range, and he's actually about $1,200 more expensive, is Jalen Suggs. Do you feel it's better to have that savings on McDaniels than to try to readjust things to get towards Suggs?
So on FanDuel, I very much prefer Jaden McDaniels to Suggs. On DraftKings, I don't really have exposure to, I don't know, I have 25% of McDaniels. So on DraftKings, though, I prefer Suggs on DraftKings. I prefer McDaniels on FanDuel.
Okay. And that makes sense. And it's just they have a nice dichotomy of their price across the different, or proportionally across the different sites there. Turning our attention to DraftKings, kind of a combo question here. Sort of Mr. Biggs and Tim Bourne both looking for top plays at each position. Mr. Biggs doesn't have a caveat, but Tim Bourne is looking for tournament options there on DK.
Yeah, so he's asking, let me find the question just so I could read it here. By the way, people are very bitter. I saw about me not roster. Oh, we just got the Magic starting lineup, by the way. Let's see. What are the Magic going to? Yeah, Magic starting lineup. It is. I like this starting unit. They're going Suggs, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, and Jonathan Isaac. So we already like Jonathan Isaac a lot. This just solidifies it now that he's starting at center. There's a realistic chance that Jonathan Isaac could play over 30 minutes now that he's in the starting lineup there. So Jonathan Isaac, just more reasons to end up liking him today. And Gary Harris also starting. So Wendell Carter Jr. going to be sticking on the bench there. So Gary Harris, don't love him, but he's a serviceable punt option. But people were bitter about me liking Gary Harris, who I don't even really like. I just like him more than some of the other options there. But Gabe Vincent, for a reference, we have Vincent projected for 18 minutes and 11 fantasy points. To actually project Vincent well for this slate, I think you do have to expect him to play like around 28 minutes. And I don't think that's in the realm of possibility for him. People in chat seem to like him a lot, so maybe they feel differently, but that's where we're at on our projections with him. Sorry, what was the question?
The DraftKings. We're looking for DraftKings top play or two at each position with the tournament lean, please.
Okay. So Mr. Biggs asked about my favorite cash options. Tim Bourne asked favorite GPP plays. All right. So if I go to DraftKings and starting with top two plays at each position for DK cash, I mean, this is going to give you more players than you would use for a cash game lineup.
Okay, maybe they're looking for a little either.
Yeah. But I'm going to answer his question a little bit differently for DraftKings. I'm just going to say these are the players that I absolutely think you should be playing in cash. Now that he's starting Jonathan Isaac for sure. Isaiah Hartenstein, speaking of a bunch of ownership, I think you want to play him in cash games. You should be playing Jamal Murray in cash. You should be playing OG Anunoby in cash. Yeah, I would say those four are the guys you really, really must have in your cash games for today. Other players that are considerations, but wouldn't necessarily be like must plays, Michael Porter Jr., KCP, Mike Conley, those other players also, I think, considerations for cash games, but not necessarily must plays like the other guys. You absolutely want to have Jonathan Isaac for sure in cash games on FanDuel and DraftKings now that he's starting. Then Tim Bourne asked favorite GPP plays at each position for DK. And I'm looking at my DK lineups, my most rostered players at each position. Point guard is Jamal Murray. Shooting guard is KCP. Small forward is very close between Michael Porter Jr. and OG Anunoby. Power forward, Jonathan Isaac. Center, that would also be Jonathan Isaac. But if we're just looking for a lower owned tournament play, Joel Embiid at center.
Okay. Projections. Let's see if we can come up with something a little different. So we didn't really utter the words Isaiah Hartenstein until the cash game portion. Mm-hmm. Do you think he is the only playable center for New York?
On DraftKings, yes. I would only play Hartenstein on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think Mitchell Robinson is a interesting tournament option for center. I actually have Mitchell Robinson on FanDuel is my second most rostered center behind Nikola Jokic. And it's not so much that I look at Mitchell Robinson and think he's guaranteed to play big minutes or anything like that. But here's where somebody like Mitchell Robinson, who is probably not going to play a ton, but has more utility to me than somebody like a Gabe Vincent, for instance. Mitchell Robinson's a very good fantasy producer on a per-minute basis. And there's also a scenario where Hartenstein gets into foul trouble guarding Joel Embiid, where Mitchell Robinson would be forced to play some bigger minutes at center, because I don't think the Knicks are going to go small in any kind of scenario against Embiid. But if we do see the Hartenstein gets into some sort of foul trouble, we could see upper 20 minutes from Mitchell Robinson. And he is currently projected for 11% ownership on FanDuel, and he's only $4,200. So at only 11% ownership, if you do get that scenario where you get mid-20s minutes out of Mitchell Robinson, he's probably scoring over 30 fantasy points at a cheap price as well as low ownership.
Right. We have an interesting question here from James Moore Jr. $4.99 super chat says, on FanDuel, do you have a biggest bust relative to salary. I see we're still refreshing a boom bust tool at the moment. He has a two-part question. Is there anyone you will be overweight to compared to the field? Where are you making a stand on FanDuel? And the boom bust just updated as well.
All right. So biggest bust on FanDuel just relative to salary. Let's see. Just relative to salary.
FanDuel does not like Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, I'm looking through. I'm going to say Karl Anthony Towns just because I think there's a real chance he only plays like 32 minutes today.
Yeah. And do you have a stand you want to make on FanDuel?
A stand. Okay, so
field?
Guys will be overweight to the field. Yeah, so here are the players that I'm most overweight to on FanDuel that are not picking up like a lot of ownership right now. Because there are like, so I'm overweight to Jonathan Isaac right now. Jonathan Isaac is going to be popular, but I'm still well overweight to the field too. If I'm looking to some lower owned players that I'm overweight to on FanDuel, Darius Garland, Anthony Edwards, Mitchell Robinson, who I talked about before, Joel Embiid, because he's only projected for 6% ownership on FanDuel, so it's an easy mark to get overweight to the field too. Yeah, those guys.
All right. I see one Eric Lindquist of Lindy's Leans, Likes, and Locks is in the chat. Happy 50th birthday to Eric. He is taking today off to celebrate that milestone birthday. So shout out. Go Team Eric. Go Team Eric. Let's see here. 22 minutes to go. We talked about the better deal. It's better than ever. $250 first card, risk-free over there, signing up through the link in our YouTube description below us. We talked about getting 50% off your first week of NBA Sims. That is going through the link in the YouTube description below us here and using the promo code playoffs. And you can also get Odd Shopper for just $1 for 1 week. That also promo code playoffs, and that supports the pickup sites as well. So you will want to check that out. Have we left anything unsaid at this point?
Left anything unsaid? I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I haven't wished Eric a happy 50th birthday, and it's people in chat, Dan06712 over in playback, he said he thought Eric was 60, which, yeah, I can understand the confusion. We seem to celebrate Eric's 50th birthday every couple of weeks around here, so I could see some of the confusion there. And the News God, we got a News God said happy 50th birthday, Eric Lindquist. So yeah, I understand the confusion.
All right, News God with the 37-month chat. I used my 35th month chat there the other day. Aging like a fine wine. There you go. Yeah, there we go. Some people saying the hate should be over once you reach 50. There we are. There we are. All righty. So we have 20 minutes until lock here. I don't see much overlay.
No, I think particularly on DraftKings, especially because DraftKings has become much more popular for NBA DFS than FanDuel, I do think that the contests were really undersized over on DK because they've been running $400,000 GPPs for the 2-game slates. Now we have a 4-game slate and they cut it down to a $300,000 prize pool. So I don't know how early is it. I assume it's full already, correct? Yeah. I don't know how early it ended up filling because I'd enter my lineups early this morning, but they definitely could have made bigger prize pools.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is they almost always, when there's been the 4-game Saturday and Sunday slates for the first round of the playoffs, each of the last 2 years, sans the pandemic season, they went with the final 3 games of the slate. They skipped the first one. So I was a little surprised that they included the first one here. So maybe they got a little nervous and made things smaller. And then sevens. Yes, Eric is actually older than I. So.
And you guys are both Eric.
That is true. So we do get mistaken for each other. We're both tall, slender, and beautiful. Well, okay, one of us is, but that would not be me. We've got 19 minutes to go here. I'm about ready to upload some lineups, Greg. Is there anything that's going to make you late swap today? Is there anything you want to set up with the ROI boosts in that Sims package? that can be a
I
50% off
very
if you use the
highly
promo
doubt we're
code.
going to get players unexpectedly ruled out. We just got the Cavaliers starting lineup: Garland, Mitchell, Strus, Mobley, Jared Allen. So no real surprises there. But it's the first round of the playoffs. And a lot of teams, too, other than teams who got in through the play-in, have been resting players for a little bit. I would be very, very surprised if there's any kind of late news where somebody gets ruled out. Like, I know officially Joel Embiid is questionable, but the only reason he's questionable is because the 76ers gotten fined twice for him not being on the injury report this year. So I just think they're being really cautious. Like, there's 0% chance that we actually see Joel Embiid sit. Who else is actually questionable on the injury report? I think it's nobody else. Yeah, the only player that's on the injury report is Joel Embiid, and he's playing. It's not a real concern.
If what is your ownership ending up on this first game, aside from Isaac and Suggs?
Yeah. So for which site?
Either side. Either side.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, Jonathan Isaac is my most rostered player. He's in like DraftKings FanDuel 80 to 90% of my lineups. Jalen Suggs is in. Yeah, I hardly get to Jalen Suggs at all on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he's in 30% of my lineups.
All right. Ghetto Farmer Boy wonders, is there any surprise starts you could see? Any coin flip decisions, any matchup chess we could see today?
I mean, it wasn't like a guarantee that Jonathan Isaac was going to be in the starting lineup, but we talked about it at the top of the show that it was something that was like relatively likely to happen after he started in the final game of the season. So we got that out of the way. We've got the starting lineup for the Cavs already. The Suns, I think we can be pretty confident the Suns are going to go Booker, Beal, Allen, Durant, Nurkic. We could be pretty confident that the Timberwolves are going to go Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Towns, Gobert. The 76ers. What's going to be interesting about the 76ers, this isn't going to apply to today's game because DeAnthony Melton's already been ruled out, but Melton's very good. And I think he should be starting for them ahead of Kyle Lowry whenever he comes back from injury. But it's going to depend on some factors. First, when does he actually come back? Is it actually going to happen in the first round? And then also, how healthy is he going to be with any kind of minutes restriction? So there's going to be a point in time where I think Melton is going to be an interesting talking point, but it just doesn't matter when he's out. So Lowry, Maxey, Oubre, Harrison, Embiid, that's going to be your starting five for the 76ers. The Knicks, it's going to be Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Anunoby, Hartenstein. The Lakers, it's going to be Russell, Reeves, Hachimura, LeBron, Anthony Davis in all likelihood. There was, if you remember, there was the big narrative last year where a lot of people, Lakers fans in particular, thought that Rui Hachimura was the secret ingredient to stopping Nikola Jokic, and that ended up not being the case at all. But I assume the Lakers are probably going to try that for stretches again. And then Jamal Murray, KCP, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. That's going to be your starting five for the Nuggets. They've played together more minutes than any other five-man unit in the entire NBA this season.
Right. We did get a question. We haven't mentioned Karis Levert. He had been dealing with some injuries down the stretch. I think he's kind of one of those guys, like Greg was mentioning, that was getting a little bit more rest. He's just not coming in very well from a price per dollar standpoint. We have him for 28 minutes, 26 fantasy points on DK, essentially the same on FanDuel, but his $6,300 salary on FanDuel, $5,900 on DK, just not overly appealing. You can find better plays for about 800 or 900 more, or about 800 or 900 less. He's just getting lost in the shuffle there with everybody in the lineup for the Cavs, and them running a full bore with the exception of their ancillary plays that are dinged up. I just think he's going back to his usual glue guy stuff. He's fourth option on offense, do a little bit of ball handling, but they're going to need him for defensive dirty work. I think that's just my assessment.
Yeah. So as far as Karis Levert goes, I think that he's the guy who probably loses out the most for the Cavs heading into the playoffs, because if we're going to see extra minutes go to Donovan Mitchell, if we're going to see extra minutes go to Darius Garland, they have to come from somewhere. And that's where I think Levert probably doesn't play massive minutes, especially now, because keep in mind they have Max Strus this year. So we did see Levert end up playing bigger minutes in some of the later games of the series against the Knicks last year. But in the first game of the series between the Cavs and the Knicks last year, so first game, first round of the playoffs, we did only get 18 minutes out of Levert in that spot. So I do wonder if the Cavs are just not really totally bought into him being a playoff guy that they want to give bigger minutes to. as far as the projection that we have on Levert, let's see, how many minutes do we put in for him?
About 27 or so.
Let's see, Levert. Yeah, we've got Levert for 27 and a half minutes, which doesn't really make him playable on DraftKings at his price point. And then on FanDuel, same deal. He's $6,300, 25 and a half fantasy points for him at $6,300 on FanDuel, $5,900 on DraftKings. It's just not really an appealing guy to get to.
All right. How much Jonathan Isaac are you getting to? My untouched run got me to 91% there on DK. It feels a little high. I'm going to cap that at 70. Where did you end up with it?
Yeah, so DraftKings to FanDuel, I have him in 80 to 90% of lineups across different contests.
There you go. I am playing him in 100% of my lineups, my one lineup over there on Yahoo. I think he is, someone asked who is the best Yahoo play. I think it is definitely Isaac at $10. Suggs is intriguing at 15. You do have Jaden McDaniels over there at 10. I would rather play Mike Conley at 15. Granted, that's point guard. Suggs is a shooting guard. But those are kind of your cheaper plays up top. And then I think one of the better plays on the low end is also Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, shooting guard, just $11. We know he's going to get 30, 35 minutes tonight. So I think he is a great fantasy point per dollar play over there on Yahoo for the five of us that still play there.
I'm unopinionated on anything on Yahoo.
Well, you just let the hate flow through you, Greg. It's okay.
It's not hate. It's like I might ask you, like, hey, who's your favorite best ball play in the like drafters tournament for today, EMac?
It is a drafters weekend. I think they were. You have 12 minutes to hurriedly do a draft. There was a bonus. No, sadly, I don't have a favorite on drafters.
Oh, it's the same opinion for me on Yahoo.
Okay, all right.
Well said by Andrew JNSN in chat. Not caring is different than hate. Very true.
That is. So, do you not care about Eric?
No, I care about Eric, both you and Eric Lindquist. I just don't care about Yahoo DFS contests.
Okay. All right. Oh, you know what? You for those of you that have not yet used that promo code playoffs to get 50% off your first week of NBA Sims, it's important to have lineups selected before you can determine what your player portfolio numbers are. Very crucial, because otherwise they appear as zero. So it's not a feature, it's not a bug, it's a user error, user oversight. How much MB did you end up with on DK?
Let's see. I have Embiid in like, what was it, 40% of lineups on DraftKings, and then 20% on let's see, on FanDuel. I have him in so FanDuel, I have him in 15% of lineups when, I mean, you consider he's only 6% owned. I'm pretty well overweight. So like I'm about 3x the field on Embiid on FanDuel.
Download my lineups there. We got 10 minutes until a lock. It's kind of knocking on wood. Fun not having extreme lineup news that's going to change things up, Greg. That's always frustrating. It's fun to see what the NBA is like when that's not occurring here. Anybody you are terrified of not having your lineups? Damn.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing about this time of year, it's impossible to get to every single stud, and it's scary because a lot of these guys are going to play 42, 44 minutes and have potential for massive games, and you can't have lineups where it's like, hey, I rostered Jokic, I rostered Embiid, I rostered Kevin Durant, I rostered Devin Booker, Jalen Brunson. So yeah, there's a lot of guys that I'm concerned that I don't have more exposure to. Like, I would love to have more exposure to Donovan Mitchell. I would love to have more exposure to Devin Booker and Jalen Brunson, but it's hard to get to every single stud across my lineups. So yeah, there's a lot of them.
Did you so it sounds like LeBron's getting lost in the shuffle?
I've got 15% of them, but it's like all of these guys, that I see that I have 10 to 15% of. There's a lot of them. Like, yeah, I wish I had 50% of them, but there's like 20 guys on the slate I feel that way about.
Yikes. Well, Jalen Suggs is somehow going to make or break my slate today. Where did you end up with on him? Upwards of 50?
On who?
Jalen Suggs.
I don't have him really on FanDuel, and he's in 30% of my DraftKings lineups. Rick Anthony. Yeah, Rick, just throw your question into chat. And then also let me know, because he said, what's the lowest cost? He wants to know what's the cheapest player that I have exposure to. On which site? On FanDuel or DraftKings?
Right. Keith Wilson.
And just throw it in, and just throw it into chat. You don't have to leave another super chat. Just throw into chat whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings.
For Keith Wilson is asking Jonathan Isaacs or Nas Reed.
Jonathan Isaac.
All those again. Another happy birthday for Lindquist. FanDuel for Ricky Anthony's question.
All right. So the cheapest player, and I'll do it the cheapest player I have meaningful exposure to, because if it's just like any player that I have in like any one lineup, then it's probably not all that helpful. Let's see. All right. Cheapest player on FanDuel. The cheapest player on FanDuel that I have a good amount of is McDaniels. The cheapest player that I have is like a really cheap option. Yeah, no, McDaniels. McDaniels.
Jaden McDaniels. What a world we are living in. It's funny that Booker and Anthony Edwards just kind of get lost in the discussion on today. It is what it is. Loaded there. Okay, so we got 7 minutes to go here for those of you that are playing baseball. We kind of have 3 slates today, so keep tabs on your DFS side of choice. Yahoo and FanDuel are kind of featuring that 4 o'clock slate. FanDuel is doing a featured slate as well at 6:40. They are skipping the second game of the Chicago-Miami doubleheader. DraftKings is including that, but they are starting at 7 o'clock. We will have MLB Live before lock covering that slate. I understand there might be a new twist towards our MLB show tonight. Is this true, Greg? We might be doing
right after this show ends, if you guys do want to go over to Playback, you could watch the NBA games over on Playback. And I thought it'd be fun just to have the NBA games playing on Playback all day. And then also over on MLB Live before lock, while you guys are doing the baseball show, we could have the basketball games playing in the background over on Playback.
Yeah, so that should be fun. Since it's a 5-gamer, we of course can always answer any late slate questions you have for that 2-gamer that will be going off at that portion of the night. But that should be good. I think we've wrung out just about everything we can here, Greg. Any last minute questions coming in for us on the old Discord?
Yeah, Iron M1 Kev wants to know, is a 70% Joel Embiid in 150 lineups too crazy? He says that he is going for it tonight. No, I don't think so at all. It's more of Joel Embiid that I'm playing. I'm assuming this is a DraftKings question, but I mean, still, I have Joel Embiid in nearly half of my lineups over on FanDuel. So the 70% is definitely more than what it is that I'm getting to. But I mean, if you're looking to take a stand on somebody who's not going to be popular, it's hard to deny the kind of upside that Joel Embiid has. And maybe he gets all the way up to 40 minutes today. It's possible, right? This is a playoff scenario. You know, he hasn't been totally 100% healthy. For what it's worth, we have Joel Embiid projected for 36 minutes, and 36 minutes, we still have him as the second highest overall projected fantasy scorer on the slate. If you did give Joel Embiid 40 minutes, then he would be our highest projected player the entire day, even ahead of Nikola Jokic. So if you guys think that Joel Embiid is live to play 40 minutes, then he really, really stands out even more so as a contrarian option because we've got Joel Embiid in our final runs here. All right, DraftKings and FanDuel, we have Embiid projected for 8% ownership on DraftKings, and we have him projected for 6% ownership on FanDuel.
This is going to be a fun one. This is the whole second season, Greg. We have what, 6.5 or so weeks of NBA playoffs ahead of us till we get to the championship, through the determine a champion.
Something like that. I don't know when the NBA finals are scheduled for.
I want to say it's usually like mid-June.
Yeah, something like that. 2 months.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Plus the Olympics are coming up. LeBron's going to be tired next year. All righty. I'll upload my baseball lineups. I'm telling you guys, these sims here, they are very, very, very helpful. It makes things much easier. Kind of relaxing, right? That's well, relaxing until it's time to not relax, right?
By the way, now that we have ownership updated for Jonathan Isaac starting, just letting you guys know. I mean, we're playing Jonathan Isaac either way. Already said that he's somebody you absolutely have to play in cash games, but final ownership projection on Jonathan Isaac is 64% on FanDuel and 67% on DraftKings. So once it was that he was confirmed in the starting lineup, projected ownership went up a little bit there. And Stinson said, where's this playback thing happening at on playback? Mike, could you just drop a link in there? Yeah. So just click on that. And then, yeah, right after this is over, I'll throw the games on playback over there.
Yeah. And I will say, we'll be in there. I had fun watching them last night. I enjoy watching the games on playback. No commercials. You just get the in-arena entertainment. It's kind of fun. I would rather hear that or see the halftime silliness than listen to a bunch of talking heads talk over each other for their 15 seconds.
Real quick, JW left us a question in Discord, and he wants to know, favorite way to get a little bit different for DK single entry, any pivots? Yeah, Joel Embiid is certainly one. Probably my favorite overall low-owned player to be getting to on DraftKings. So Joel Embiid's a good way to differentiate a single entry lineup. Let's see. Who else?
I like Brunson over there.
He's very popular, though. He's looking for a contrarian option.
Then definitely.
Yeah, I'd just say Embiid. Embiid, if you have Embiid in a single entry lineup, it's going to be different by default.
All righty, we are 40 or so seconds out, so we are going to wrap things up. We do have the NHL strategy show coming up a little bit later. That NHL playoffs start today. The first game is at 5 o'clock, so you guys can catch Josh and Cliffy on their show. We, of course, as we mentioned, will have MLB live before lock for that game, that slate that's starting at 6:40 on FanDuel, 7:10 on DraftKings. We'll cover that. That'll be live on YouTube and on playback, and we'll throw out any NBA questions you have as well for that one. Talk a little props wagering as well. Any final thoughts before we slide on out of here, Greg?
No, just go and check out playback. If you guys want to watch the games, you can go watch them on playback with everybody else, or you could also just hang out and chat and sweat the games out with other people. So be leaving the games playing on playback throughout the day. And then also I'm going to be going and checking in there to seeing what VIPs are available, and I'll give them out to some. Well, there are people who are asking for VIP already in playback that already have them. So that is going to do it for us on YouTube, but I'll jump into playback and I'll start giving out some VIPs there.
All right. With that, you can follow Greg on Twitter at GEhrenbergDFS. I'm at EMac DFS. It is stochastic_COM. Good luck, gamers.